So, this is the first kind of pod collab I've done in the spirit of this AVGN commentary thing that we originally said, like, all right, enough of that, and then it's just been repeatedly accused of clout
Yep.
chasing, bottom feeding, um, and several other insults. But yeah, look, I can't. Much like he cannot quit the slobs, I cannot quit him.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree.
yeah, I
I'm
can't stop talking about him.
the worst thing I did was the one time I decided to talk about James Rolfe is I titled the video "I'm done with James Rolfe."
Ah, well, that'll teach you.
That was the stupidest thing I did, and then I changed the title and got endless for changing the title.
Oh, really? They were like,
Yes.
there's no integrity in this video. That means that somebody cares enough to track it.
Yeah.
So yeah, so to give people some background on how we've connected and what we have in common
Yeah.
is, we both have small channels. We talk about pop culture,
Yep.
pop culture commentary, this sort of thing. And we both are right around the exact same time, like twins. We
Yeah.
put up videos being like, that whole thing with cinema. I think did you first respond to the plagiarism one?
When I found out when I saw the drama, what I really saw was a guy that was just not being honest with his fans. And of all the problems everyone was complaining about Newt being a plagiarist and being just not a cool guy, and Screenwave being not cool and being, sort of shady, underhanded, like taking over the channel. Of all of the things everybody was talking about, what nobody seemed to be talking about was James being dishonest with his fans.
Yeah, and it
And
was,
that,
and until people started talking about that, he was actually given a lot of credit. I
right,
gave him credit for this as well, for being so disengaged with that kind of uglier side of internet
right.
content. But there is a balance to be struck where it's like, but now you're like, you're starting to look like very aloof. You're starting to
Right.
look like you don't want to talk about what your
Well,
fans want to talk about.
well,
Yeah,
he
it's
just didn't. I think the truth is what benefited him for so long, but turned around and finally bit him. And I mean, not finally like oh, this guy
yeah,
finally got his comeuppance, but he just didn't engage, didn't care about his fans. I think he really genuinely took the perspective of I'm a director, I'm a filmmaker, people consume what I create. And it's like Steven Spielberg wouldn't engage with people that had a problem with ET on Twitter.
Oh, I see. So, in other words, he's resisting the kind of inherent realities of being a YouTuber versus being a commercial filmmaker.
That's how I perceived it. Yes.
Yeah, that makes
And
sense.
and ultimately that was my weird sticking point that I wanted to talk about on YouTube was he didn't care enough about his fans to be honest with them, and can over and over again he that detachment turned into outright dishonesty and outright lies to his
Right.
fans.
When you're not doing, when you're not talking about James, which is only a couple of videos, what would people find on your channel?
And again, because James is such an inspirational force in the channel, it's really about, because I grew up right next to a video store in the 80s and 90s. So a lot of what I talk about is the nostalgia for the days of the video store. I mean, when I was a little kid, I was going to that video store. I would walk across the street and play they had, it was like a half arcade, half video store. I don't, that might be the golden crown, or the golden jewel of like an 80s kid, is having a half arcade, half video store that you grew
Oh
up
yeah,
right next to.
absolutely.
And then my parents also told the owner of the video store, he can rent whatever he wants. Um,
Give
so
it
I
to
think
him.
I think they said like no boobs, like nothing too sexy, nothing too boobs, can't go
But
in the
after
back room.
that,
But other than that, go nuts. And I rented that horror section out by probably the time I was 8 or 9 years old. It was really probably not when somebody should be watching those movies. But yeah, it's really
if I may interject, I had a
yeah,
similar experience, which was my parents. Well, I got into trauma around like 13, 14,
yeah.
and I started asking for trauma tapes for Christmas, and they just had no. I mean, the box art kind of will clue you in, but like under the Christmas tree at 13, 14 years old, I was unwrapping Romeo and Juliet and
Oh my god.
Toxic Avenger, and that was some parents are very free about this sort of thing. Mine were not. Mine were like no rated R movies.
Yep.
That was their best standard because they weren't going to pre-screen anything. They weren't really movie people.
Right.
But yeah, and they weren't really into rentals either. But I by around that same time when I discovered trauma, I wanted to start making my own stuff. Are you now, or have you ever been a filmmaker?
Oh my god. I would say, have I ever been? Yes. I made, and I think that's ultimately the larger discussion of tonight is, as a kid, I made lots of movies. And then as a teenager, there came that point where I had friends who I think like interned in LA in college, and
Yep.
they were like, oh my god, like you could just make a movie out here, like you could just do these things, like this is a dream factory. And we tried to make a couple.
I had a different experience in Los Angeles.
Well, I'm glad you did, because you made actual movies. Like,
right.
I had friends that interned with Gary Marshall and came back with like, oh, you could just make a movie. Like, get out there, make a movie. And we made a couple movies and nothing happened. And everybody went their separate ways. And there was a time when I thought maybe that would be my future on YouTube, was making, trauma-esque, cheap, fast, funny, gory, whatever. And it really didn't amount to much. But
And YouTube's not very friendly to narratives anyway. We do a show on Red Cow called No Views, where we try to find narratives that were uploaded but not watched, which is not hard to find.
Right.
Because a lot of people make a lot of narratives, and it's just nonfiction. It seems to, I don't know, like in terms of distribution of views, it's nonfiction stuff on YouTube must account for 99.9% of it. Like nobody's going to YouTube to watch somebody's narrative fiction because it's just too unreliably crappy. It's one of the things I've had, the times I've been proud of work that I've done. It's been really hard to convince people to watch because it's because independent movies made by somebody have a very bad reputation.
Right.
Just generally, but that was one of the things I admired about. That was one of the things I admired about James as well, was that, or at least like a path that he paved where I was like, oh, that could kind of work. Is like, let me hook you in with some of my reviews, commentary, podcasts. Let me make you a fan of me. Let me make you root for me. And then I'll be able to, once a year or something, I can show you something narrative that I'm doing, or something that you might not otherwise discover. It's kind of, like Kevin Smith probably did that the most and earliest, which was like, I can't promise that you'll like every one of my movies, but I'm going to try to make you a fan of me. And so you'll come along for the ride for stuff you might not otherwise come along for the ride for.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I still listen to, after I was an extra in Jersey Girl.
Were you?
You might not know this. I mention it at the drop of a hat because it's my only name drop. But I was an extra in Jersey Girl. I drove out to New Jersey with my dad, and I got to watch Ben Affleck, George Carlin, Liv Tyler, I can't remember who else, Stephen Root, perform a musical number from Sweeney Todd. Because they came out.
Scene, yeah.
Yeah, and they came out and they said, this is what you're supposed to be watching. We're going to perform it so that you can know what you're reacting to. And they all came out and they all performed it. And I saw George Carlin getting coffee, in the craft service afterwards. And it was a really wild time. But for me, because that's the only time I've ever had a brush with Hollywood in any way.
I don't hate Jersey Girl, by the way. It's there are Kevin Smith movies I dislike a whole lot more than Jersey Girl. I, I would say like Yoga Hosers and Cop Out for me are unwatchable. Like where I'm like, there's nothing here for me at all. But Jersey
Yeah,
Girl is not that. Jersey Girl, yes, it's schmaltzy. Yes, it's got some pacing problems that I believe were rooted in the fact that they wanted to diminish the effects of Jennifer Lopez.
right.
But I think that George Carlin delivers a really cool performance in it, and I think the girl is very good,
Yep.
and I like Affleck. I'm an Affleck fan, so
I am
I
too.
yeah.
I'm a giant Affleck fan, and I'm a
Are you?
giant Affleck apologist. But
Well, do
I've
people really hate Ben Affleck at this point, though? I mean, he has done a lot of good in movies over the course of his career. Between his directorial run was really excellent, with the exception of, did you see Live by Night?
no.
I think so. That was his most recent directorial thing, and it was around the time he was trying to make Justice League, and we all know how that went. And he was, I think he made that whole movie during his alcoholism, and you can kind of, it's unfortunate to see somebody so talented kind of drop the ball on what looks like an expensive movie. But of
Yeah,
course, Town, Argo, Gone Baby Gone, Gone Baby Gone's probably my favorite of that
yeah,
bunch. Casey, say what you will about him, I think he's a really powerful performer.
yeah.
Um,
I have no problems with the Affleck
family,
dynasty.
they're all fine. The dad, the mom,
Yep.
they're all
Mr.
good
and
with them.
Mrs. Affleck, I'm sure they're wonderful people. They're very supportive, if anything else.
Well, so as we've done these AVGN commentary videos, there have been some calls to like, hey, why don't you review the movie,
Yep.
the AVGN movie? Now, I don't know, yeah, maybe someday. I'll tell you this. I'll add a little bit of intrigue. I back in 2014 when it came out, I went out to see it. It screened here in Massachusetts, and I took my wife out. We didn't have a child at the time. We didn't have a kid at the time,
Yeah.
and we had to drive like an hour and a half out. James was not there or anything like that, but it was a pretty full crowd. They had a nice big poster up of the AVGN movie. I was like, this is pretty cool. Like
Yeah.
James Rolfe done good, and it's 2 fucking hours, and, and I was I was enthusiastic to be there, and I remember that moment with a spouse or a friend when you're watching a movie with somebody and you both went in excited. There's kind of an oh no moment between the
Yeah.
two because if you're reasonable people, you give it 40 minutes before you kind of finally look at the other person and go like,
I
it
gave.
sucked, right?
I'm sorry. I gave the AVGN movie 10 minutes,
Oh,
and
you
I
didn't even
went,
watch the whole thing?
"This is unwatchable.
Yeah, it's rough.
I can't. I can't."
Well,
That's what I kept thinking.
I was so
You were in a
obsessed at
theater.
well, right. I was chained to the seat like
Yeah.
Alex. But I was so obsessive and strange and bizarre that like Steven Soderbergh, I went home, I got a copy of the movie, and I recut it. I cut 50 minutes out of it, and it's on a Google Drive somewhere. I've shared it with a few friends.
And
It's the
it's
kind of
an
thing that
acceptably watchable version.
yeah, I dare not share it,
No.
on something like a Reddit where it can be in violation of copyright. Although I believe things like fan cuts are protected in some way. I mean, you got like these Hobbit fan cuts that are out there that everybody just puts a disclaimer on, and it seems
Yeah.
like it's okay. But yeah, well, I mean, I think the reason I was compelled to recut it was because despite it, I think like the root is it's rotten at the root. It's got some
Yeah.
bad premises. And if anybody's seen the Dylan the Night Owl 6-hour epic about AVGN, he really does a good job dissecting why. But I was like, at the very least, we don't need to repeat information. We don't need to repeat jokes. The jokes aren't great, but they would land a whole lot better if you only told them once and at their best time. There's a lot of plot and character confusion around like, all right, so why does he work at this place if he's famous?
Right.
And like there's a lot of like in movie character internal logic problems, and it's all the reason I was like compelled to like, okay, I'm just gonna go see if I can fix it is because if you just cut out big swaths of it, the confusion disappears.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, okay. You're like, I anybody who again is weird enough to care or to even like put that thing back in your Blu-ray player, the entire thing with his like GameStop job need not be there. There's like a boss that fires him. None of it has any bearing on the plot at all.
Yeah.
But so I recut it, and I kind of feel like that's the most I have to say about that movie is my recut. But that was back in 2014. That was back in the day. But you said, "Hey, I have a better idea. I have a creative idea. I got something that the people really want."
That nobody wants. They don't know they want it yet. They don't know they
don't
want it. Yeah.
You said the Six SNIX Flicks.
The Six SNIX Flicks.
These movies that are foundational to James Rolfe, the filmmaker, the artist.
Yep.
They're memeable intro clips that he's made for all of the
Oh my
episodes.
god. Yesterday, the Cinemassacre Truth was reposting clips from this, and I thought, oh my god, it's so... Well, I'll say this, it was the opposite of perfect, because I have in my notes, that I thought this would be the glue, the way to unite the haters and the truthers. But I'm wrong, because the truthers are so... I forgot that so many memes came out of the Six SNIX Flicks.
Right.
That they hate James. And they love and they hate him. And so many memes came out of the introductions to the Six SNIX Flicks.
Well, that's great. That's great framing, because I don't want to just roast somebody's teen movies.
Right.
That would be really, really easy. We would say, "Oh, it's bad for all of the most obvious reasons." No, and this was your thought as well. You said, actually, despite all of their apparent flaws, aren't these movies that where he was finding his voice for the first time? Isn't this kind of the passion and the spirit, no matter how unwatchable?
Right.
Isn't this the passion and the spirit that would grow into this extremely influential online figure? And I find them to me, like, the most interesting thing to talk about is I find them extremely relatable. I would guess that a whole lot of people online that watch James's stuff have made movies with their friends at that age that are a whole lot like that.
Right.
And some people have said, like, well, why would you, so he gets made fun of, perhaps rightfully, because it's a little strange, for referring to his filmography as, like, I've made 500 films, as opposed to being like, well, let me level with you. Many of them are internet videos, and there's films and there's videos, but I can kind of understand that he was cataloging his growth, and I actually think it's really cool that he decided to be so forthcoming about, like, hey man, this might not be for you, but for posterity, if you like what I grew into, I'm gonna upload this to. So I've done the same. Long before these AVGN videos, I had done the same thing with my website. Like, you can go from 1997 to to today and be like, oh, that was the first time I made a movie, or that's the first time I thought I was making a movie.
Right.
All the way up to today. Who's it for? It's for yourself, first and foremost.
Yep.
So that's probably why he gets made fun of for it, because there's an ego element to it, of course. But I got news for everybody. There's an ego element to making art. There was a great quote recently I read some clickbait article that was about Francis Ford Coppola was the next person to kind of crap on Marvel movies. And, so whatever. It's all good. But he threw in there something cool where he was like, I think that you've got to make a movie as if that your life, your existence is a miracle, because everybody's existence is a miracle. The odds that you're here manifested in this body with this mind is a miracle. Now go make the movie in that spirit. And I know that sounds so egocentric, but it's like, that's the kind of egocentricity that's required to make great art, I think.
I at some point tonight, I was gonna call the Six SNIX Flicks high art.
Really?
Yes. I
You
think
got to make a big case for that.
this is. I might as well drop my hot take right now.
All right, let's drop it.
I think the SNIX saga needs to be held up with Tommy Wiseau's The Room.
Oh, you think so?
I do think so. I've watched it. I think we. God, man, the first time we sort of connected privately was months ago, and I said like, oh, like this is there's two ways for us to collab. It's either negatively by talking about the AVGN movie,
Right.
or there's this thing about the Six SNIX Flicks, which we're both kids that grew up with a video camera in our hand.
Right.
And I feel connected to James because of that when I watch those movies. And since then, I've watched them 4 times, something like that, like a ridiculous amount of times. And I watched them last night to record them in preparation for this. And last night, I really started feeling like this is the stuff of midnight movies. This is the stuff of like, let's get a ton of people together and have a whale of a good time. Like, not cynically, not like making fun of these things, but like celebrating these things.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
like there's a sincerity about James. And I think the thing to point out too is the movies themselves, but there's also the introductions that James recorded in 1998, 1999, something like that, when he was at the height of his terrible,
Mustache.
terrible Jersey mustache.
And let me tell you, I recorded I recorded intros of myself. I went way worse than that. I'm sure he did it too. I made like full out, like I interviewed all my friends, tell me about what it's like to work on a Frankie Frain movie.
Yes.
Which is something that didn't even quite exist yet.
No,
And,
it's a Frankie Frain joint. Like,
yeah, exactly. But there's a, you have to kind of mimic your betters.
Yep.
You have to kind of like, you have to hype yourself up. You have to pretend that what you're doing is important and miraculous, no matter how untrue it is.
Right.
And of course, that's the thing. I think that's what you're kind of striking at, where you're like, well, why would it be fun to watch something so amateurish? So, you know, it's like, well, a lot of times the reason we enjoy a Room or a Troll 2 is the cognitive dissonance, the amount of cognitive separation between what we're trying to achieve and what was achieved.
Right.
And sometimes, yeah, that's like, it's pure mockery, but I think most of the time it's not. Most of the time it's like, hey man, we all fall way short of our dreams, but there's something inspirational about chasing them anyway.
Right.
In some ways, there's something more inspirational about falling short. And of course, in James's case, he didn't really fall short. He went on to be perhaps the most influential online figure for this kind, at least for these kinds of circles ever.
Agreed.
So it's like, it doesn't happen without the stupid SNIX flicks.
Right.
You know, he's definitely not ashamed of it, which is something I find admirable about him.
Yeah.
I've never seen him be like apologize for making art.
Yeah.
You know, that's why it's so, to watch him be, you know, sort of abandon his art is like, it's very not him. And hey man, I got a kid too. So I get that there's a transition period in adulthood, but, well, so, you know, what we haven't done yet is even described. So if somebody hadn't gone through what we've gone through.
Right.
Because when you said, well, how about the Six SNIX Flicks? 6 short films.
Yep.
I said, how long what do I got to do to prep for this podcast?
What do I gotta wade through?
What's the proposition here? And you said it's 2 hours. I work out for 2 hours a day. So I was like, well, you've got the time, my man.
Yep.
You might fall behind on a Sega Lord X video, but you're going to have to take that sacrifice.
I mean, I don't appreciate you not focusing physically on the SNIX flicks, but at least mentally you were.
Yeah, well, you get it mentally exhausted, and then I'm physically exhausting as well. So, but the first like three got a lot more Frankie than the last three. Um, he made six short films. They range from 14 to 21
Yep.
minutes. I think most of them are closer to the 21-minute mark.
Although I will
They
point out in the 2013, 14, 13, because it was the 20th anniversary of SNIX, where he re-released them. He let them loose on the world. He said that he trimmed 20 to 45 minutes out of each
Holy
film.
shit! Oh my
He
god! Could he do that for the AVGN movie, please? I'm going to assume that he cut out a few things that may have repeated themselves,
Yes.
such as running and yelling and running and yelling. But yeah, so the first movie, 1993. So James was born in 80.
Yep.
And so I was born in 86, so I'm 6 years younger than him. And so I don't know if he's technically Gen X. He must
He
be.
is.
He must be on the young end.
Because
Of
I
Gen X,
was
yeah.
October of 80. And
Okay.
I consider I'm in that super gray area. So
Yep.
he was July 80. So I think he's firmly Gen X.
Got it. Yeah, my friend John, who's on the channel, he was 80 as well. So he's like he's with you guys where, like he was a teen adopting computers.
Yep.
I was like 6 adopting computers.
We call it
And so
the Oregon Trail age, where we were
right.
the generation that was, we were born into no computers, and we ended the decade with computers all around us.
Yeah, right. Where like I can say I did grow up with computers. I was really young, and there were Apple IIs in the library from the time I first saw school.
Yeah.
And so so if he was born in 80, so he's 13 when he makes the first one.
Yep.
And this first one's got so he does a little intro with his crustache, and he says,
And his Jersey accent.
yeah, big time. Are you Midwest, by the way? Is that what I hear?
We're going to the state fair. We're probably gonna try to get some Annie's cookies and some cheese curds. They got jalapeno cheese curds this year. What is that all about? It's too spicy for me.
We have a lot of fans from Minnesota, actually.
Do you?
Like a fair number, yeah.
I'm one of them. So
there's another one. I'm telling you, there's something about like, do I need to move to this fucking place?
I wouldn't be opposed. We could do more stuff together.
These are my people. These are clearly my people. Yeah, we have a number of people in or around like the Duluth area. It seems
Okay.
like. So anyway, so he makes this Jersey film. He says, I had some friends over. We came up with it. It's like it was more to hang out.
Yep.
It was like, hey, want to make a movie? We've all been there, and as you watch the 14 minutes of mostly raw footage, like chaotic, it's like children with raw footage,
Right.
kind of. It's not that different than what my daughter would have produced at age 4.
Yes.
Total chaos, but you can tell as it goes on chronologically. Then he says he made the whole movie in a day and stuff. So at first I thought, it almost feels like he kind of, they shot a bunch of it when the friends were over. Then when the friends went home, James couldn't stop thinking about the movie and he went to go finish it. But he says he did it in the same day. Nevertheless, I get the impression that they're all having fun. Then the friends kind of disengage, but James is like, his imagination is unlocked.
Yes.
He's like, this is amazing. I'm my best self.
Yes.
At 13 when I'm making this movie. And you can tell he sort of starts to develop this little story with the stupid construction paper mask, and he starts to take his own lore seriously.
Very seriously.
Right.
So he did an intro in 2013 about the history
in the video store.
And in that intro, I think he says that his friends did leave early and he had to complete the movie on his own.
Oh, there you go. It reads that way to me.
the end of the first SNIX film is kind of my is kind of my favorite, because it's a little kid by himself. Everything turns into first person, or it's him with like controlling a bat off camera, where like a bat is hitting his face off camera. Everything turns into him and a camera. And I really genuinely am entertained by that.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Well, it's good energy. It's a positive thing that you're watching.
Yes.
You know, and it also gives me that vibe of, I relate to this. There's kind of a period when you just start making stuff for the first time and you say, I'm going to make some effort to make something. Everybody around you loves it because you're in it, and they love it because your friends are in it, you know? And so I remember I got so frustrated. I was making my first feature, 10 pounds. I need to lose 10 pounds. And it took us 6 years to shoot it, from age 16 to like 21. So I guess 5 years. And I remember like showing people fully edited scenes. I was pretty proud of them. They were competently, you know, or at least I thought so at the time, competently done scenes. And they had like John's music score, and it was like pretty polished for what we, you know, for our age. And they would always be like, "Who's that?" You know, like some actor in it. They're like, "Who's that?" And I'm like, "What do you mean who it? It's the character. That's who it is." And you know, there was like, they didn't give a fuck about anything going on except for like, who in the town did you get to do this, and do I know them? So I get that vibe from it, that I bet when they were done, it was exciting to show everybody, no matter how dumb it was, like everybody, you know, there's essentially outtakes throughout the whole first movie. It's people busting up and laughing in the middle of takes and stuff.
Yes.
And I'm sure that was enjoyable for the family.
I should point out, I have 4 pages of notes. And one of the things I wrote down was embarrassment / non-committal. And I think that's the first SNIX is the most fun. And not punching down to 13-year-olds, 12-year-olds, whatever they were.
Right.
I watch that and I have so much fun, and I don't know if it's because we were kids that made movies. I don't know. I mean, my wife fell asleep watching these movies. We watched them last night, and to be fair, SNIX Returns is the worst. So it's
which one is that?
That's number 2. And when you're going 6 deep into a film series, which going 6 deep is something I've never said to a woman, but going 6 deep into a series, when 1 is super fun, 2 is borderline unwatchable. That's where you lose everybody. And
2 was when 2 was his big, like, so the first one was 93, second one was 96. Yes. So 3 years passed. So there's a big difference between a 13-year-old and a 16-year-old. And for some reason, 16-year-old James, mustache and all, said, I could make any movie in the world. I know. I'm going to sequelize my construction paper mask outtake.
And he still had the SNIX mask. He says that. Yeah. He says, I still had the SNIX mask.
Right.
So, as a joke, he makes SNIX Returns.
I think he's always been attracted to, like, oh, is there a way I could sequelize something amateurish I did and kind of like re-legitimize it? He did this recently with we can't talk about these SNIX films without talking about the head incident.
Right.
This horror film that it frankly was a lot more competent, made around probably a little bit after these SNIX flicks. It was a little bit more competent, a little bit less amateurish, but still, kind of a tough sit. But then he, many years later, last year during COVID, he sequelized the head incident. It's a curious decision.
And that's when we saw the natural hairline of James Rolfe.
Yeah, well, I thought that was his coming out.
I thought so too. I thought that was when we were going to see that. When I saw that, I thought, That's the nerd. That's
Right.
where the nerd should go, and we would all celebrate it. All of his
It'd
haters
just
would
be
celebrate
crazy
it.
and be like, I don't know, I lost all my hair on these
Yeah, you
fucking
go,
games.
ah, Jekyll and Hyde, ah.
Yeah. I tell you, Mike Matei would have suggested it. I'm
Well,
sure.
Mike Matei has a beautiful head of hair. There's, I don't
Right.
know if there's anybody on YouTube that has a more enviable head of hair than Mike Matei.
There was something going on on the subreddit the other day that was they were Googling Coke bloat and showing pictures of Mike because they're all convinced that he's a Coke head, but who I can't explain this.
Understandable.
'Cause
He's
he's
always got those
Coca-Cola.
like sunken in, like I haven't slept in 3 days eyes, but
Yeah. Yeah, he's living his best life. I don't think I can think the words Coke bloat without laughing. Anyway, oh, just on the topic of the first movie, you can tell that James like there were a couple of little teeny special effects wins in that first movie. I'm gonna presume that first one had no VCR editing of any kind. Everything you're watching,
it is.
in
He
camera.
said it's all in camera. All in camera.
Yeah. But you can like there's a couple of like little special, the in-camera special effects, and there's a couple of music cues that almost sort of kind of work for a movie of its caliber. And I would guess that unlocked James' imagination, where he was like, oh well, shit, if that's possible, then what else is possible? And it's like it's the journey you have to go on to become creative. You have to sort of like stumble in the darkness and just try stupid shit, and and then if you make a good discovery, you kind of perseverate on that good discovery, and then you go, well, okay, well, how can I expand on this, and then how can I expand on the next thing? And so it's what you would recommend to your child if they wanted to get into stuff. You'd be like, I don't know, just make crap, just it's going to be horrible anyway, so start
It's
doing it.
horribly watchable.
So the second one, so you hate that the most, or that's the one that if you were to put together your midnight
Yes.
screening, maybe you'd omit the second one, or is it necessary to understand
I
the
think
plot?
it is all necessary.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things I noticed
Yeah.
that I was surprised to see. So with the significance, we should go that far, of this movie is that, again, 13 to 16, there's this memeable video of he goes, it's not just the return of SNIX, it's the return of me. He had this kind of self-aggrandizing moment where he was like, I've taken 3 years off from this filmmaking stuff, and God damn it, I'm gonna try again. I'm gonna try to make it good. And yeah, it for a 16-year-old, I was a little surprised to see that it possessed almost as much raw footage childish nonsense as the 13-year-old version. But there was some of that dark hallway monster type stuff that I was like, this is a little AVGN. This is a little a Halloween episode, Freddy Krueger, like just a little bit. It was because there's a pretty big gap of quality from these movies to even the earliest AVGNs. Like there's a leap in quality. So I'm always interested when I watch stuff like this to be like, oh, where does it bridge? And you're starting to see it here a little bit.
Well, is number 2 where you really start to get into the Zins lore, like hockey mask, sheet?
Yeah, I think so.
Because I love this. I assume he got his sister or whoever to be like, to do the physical body of Zins, and he's like, there is a place where SNIX, and like all she's doing is kind of like miming to his voiceover, and I love that stuff, and that continues through the entire movie.
This was the one. Well, yeah. What makes it so? If you were gonna have a big laugh at it, it's because the voice is bad and it goes on for a very long time. Like it's not done sparingly. It continues to be this stupid voice. I'm kind of doing
and all
Frank.
of the
Shadow, you imbecile.
every character has a catchphrase, which is the most basic sentence that anybody has ever said. SNIX is, "I will destroy you." And that's his catchphrase. And
Nice.
characters call him out for his catchphrase, I think, through the series. And then Zins says, "You see?" Like he ends sentences with "You see?" Like he's a noir 20s detective, even though he's from 1693.
So one of the notes I had about the second one was regarding the first two. I was like, well, I don't really know if I can critique these. I don't know if they're like, there's not anything to say like this worked and this didn't work. It's just a guy trying to find his voice, and so they exist for that purpose. You know, it's like a movie has to meet a certain threshold to even kind of like have an opinion about it. At least in the traditional sense. But then we get to the third one, 1998. So now it's been 5 years since that first childhood film. It's been 2 since the return of me, as he puts it. And Brian shuffles his notes because now he's got some notes. So how does this? You didn't like the second one. How does the third one strike you?
Well, let me just point out first notes on. There's SNIX Returns, and SNIX Again, which, James, you've done it again on the naming scheme.
That's very Machete kills, Machete rides again.
SNIX in Space was the next one. I can only assume.
Yeah.
But my my notes for what I love about SNIX was constant family noise. The first movie it's constantly the family is going about their business and they don't care that James is making a movie, and I think that's super fun. The constant embarrassment, non-committal of everyone else besides James. The family standing in the kitchen during the murder scene, which I thought was super cute. And then everybody goes home and James finishes the movie by himself, which I thought was great.
Common theme.
And that movie had a really, and I think unintentional, because I assume James hadn't seen Evil Dead when he was 13. But it had a really Evil Dead vibe to it, which is really fun to look back on. It's like, 10-year-olds making Evil Dead, which there's something really fun to watch about that. But my notes...
Totally. Well, Evil Dead kind of has that friends making a movie vibe, and that's part of the appeal of Evil Dead.
It does, yes, absolutely. SNIX Returns, my notes are sucks, borderline unwatchable. And that's it. That's all I have to say about SNIX Returns.
Can I make a guess here? Did your wife bow out at episode 2, and that kind of colored your perspective?
No, because by the time my wife watched it, that was my 4th time going through the saga.
Okay.
But
so you hated
every time. I thought, because James is like, they keep getting better every time. Every movie is better than the last, and that's it's such a sharp drop from 1 to 2, and then 3 really not overcorrects, but it corrects and it pulls itself out of the dive. But
the important thing to say about 3 is, he makes a movie when he's a kid, makes a movie when he's a little bit older, and then he gets it in his head. He's like, I'm gonna turn this SNIX thing I just did, these 2 movies, into a 6-film anthology. So it's not as though just over the years ultimately 6 were made. The latter 4 were all kind of done.
Yeah,
Lord
he
of the
says
Rings style.
He says I had all these ideas, and each idea really, when you boil it down, is a special effect. And he says, I had these ideas for 4 special effects. And I couldn't do 4 special effects in one movie. That's absurd. So I made number 3 with a special effect that completes the trilogy. And in the movie, the character says, I have completed the trilogy. And I wanted to point that out. I I don't know if that's ever been said. I don't know if Luke said, we just completed the trilogy.
Yeah, like he's this close to being like, I made the movies.
He had these ideas and he said, let's spread them out. And he had, I don't see why. I guess in kid logic, each one needs its own movie. I don't see why they couldn't have all been in a single movie. He said it took 10 months for the third movie.
Yeah, this is where
made?
I have to start getting a little ungenerous. Where I'm like,
Yes.
okay, you're 18, and like 18 ain't 13, and
Right, you can drive. You can.
Yeah,
You've said, oh, like my friends' schedules. Like he can only come over for an hour in 10 months.
he talks
He
about
can only come over for an hour.
which what's hilarious about you saying that is like there are similarly baffling things that happen now where he's like, well, there's just no damn time.
Right.
There's no
All
time
of
to record one podcast every month.
That's. I will say, all of the memes, all the foundations were laid in the 90s, which is shocking.
And they look what they've birthed.
Right. Yeah, they've I mean, they've birthed diehard fans and diehard whatever truthers, whatever they're anti-fans, because they're all people that like
that he it may be the case that he's always had a really weird relationship with time. Like no joke, like all joking aside, I think he has some weird, the way he perceives like the time that is available is maybe he approaches it with a lot of anxiety. Like obviously he approaches it with a lot of anxiety. He won't stop talking about how worried he is that he won't have time, or how afraid he is that time won't allow him to do the things he wants to do, supposedly.
Yeah. All I'm saying is it's 5:40. All I'm saying is it's 5:40. We need to end this right now.
Exactly. But yeah, he in this third one there was at least a kind of MS Paint-ish animated intro, and I didn't hate it.
I want to know, what did he animate that in?
There was some like storybook animator type software that I had used probably around that same era. It's like 98, where you can, it's not like, it's only animation in the sense that on the computer you can click next.
Yeah.
And so you get to see a new image. And here's something that James and I share is like, no matter how dumb, if we're committed to the idea of like, I'm gonna make this fucking movie, like you'll sit there and you'll animate that thing as long as it takes, to achieve what you're trying to achieve. And he obviously filmed it off of the computer. Great technique. I did that lots when I was a child too. I remember there's a moment, I have a home video of it, in fact, where my mom started recording my sister and I. We were like making Christmas cookies, and the TV was playing, and I had this. You can see something clicks in my brain where I go, would you be able to like take the camera and record the TV, and then we would have a recording of the TV? You could tell I was working my way through like, and what possibilities would that unlock?
Yeah.
So it's like something that's available to a child that they can easily record a little animation. So I thought that was cool. And I'm guessing that by this one he's doing tape to tape, he's doing VCR to VCR.
Yeah, I think so.
Editing. Yeah.
Yep.
Which is, if I don't know if you've done it, you've got a YouTube channel, called Home Video, but I did it with like actual, so you can, in case we have younger viewers,
go to bed.
What?
Go to bed if you're 11 years old. What are you doing up?
The way that I remember, I had a video teacher who was he was a news guy. He was a news videographer, and he would cut together quick news packages that had to air that night. And he had a mobile version of this, which was really cool. This little DV cam tape deck, but the fundamentals of it is there's two VCRs. One is your source and one is your destination. So if the source has all of your footage that you shot on the VHS camera, you queue up to where you want the endpoint to be, and then you start recording it onto the second VCR, and then when you have your out point, you stop.
Yep.
And the problem with that, of course, you can imagine, is you can't like then insert a new clip without laying the track down from scratch. That's why they call it linear editing. It's because you're stuck.
Yeah.
There's one editing path. It's hell. And I think James is clearly James is the kind of person who was like, well, if that's how I got to do it, then that's how I got to do it. I got to make my movie,
Right.
which I love. But they did, just in case anybody's interested. There were professional versions of that where they actually had tape decks that, because you can imagine that like the rewind, fast forward, and pause, if you've ever used a VCR, is not very precise. But they really
Right.
did. They had professional ones with dials where you could get right to the frame. Of course, you
Yep.
still had all that generation loss, but you could do it. And,
Oh, all that. Even with SVHS, it was
yeah,
all that generation loss. I used to do that in high school, and I've looked at, because I live not far from my high school, and these are all these connective tissues to James, where I feel like there's a lot of positives that I connect to James, and there's a lot of negatives I connect to James. But I have communicated with my high school about, do you still have those old SVHS decks? Like, can I buy them from you? Do you have that old Amiga video toaster? Can I buy that from you?
very cool.
And they don't care. But if I could sit down here in the basement with all the spiders and all the centipedes and edit on linear SVHS tapes through a video toaster with that sheep transition where the sheeps fall down and go bay bay, I would do it. And I think James would do it. I think he kind of misses those days. I don't know if it's misses, but I think there's something about.
That would be a good creative challenge for him, is to be like, hey, James, the next time you make a movie, you got to edit it linearly on tape to tape. This has got to be the return of you.
Yes, the return of you, James. Grow the stash.
Grow the
I
stash
have
back, get 2 VCRs and do it, man. Yeah.
my very last note is James should do some 48-hour film challenges.
Yeah.
I really think, looking back at these videos, I think, and that's the other thing that I wrote down, was his quote was that he is, where is it? He loved accepting the unpredictable back then.
Yeah.
And I think that is gone.
That's an excellent point where, again, something I think I relate to with him is he and I both very much embrace, perhaps too much, the like, let's not let perfect be the enemy of the good.
Yeah.
Like, we're here to make a thing. We're here to call something done. We're here to, and again, it's why his loss in productivity is a little bit more meaningful than, some people interpret when we talk about this sort of stuff, or we analyze this sort of stuff, as like they hear is somebody who's like, I wish he would make more content for me. I'm like, it has nothing to do with my consumption of his content. This is a discussion about creativity. Because somehow, to your point, somehow this guy from New Jersey represents a whole lot of people. A lot of people. I mean, all across the country, all across the world, a lot of people see themselves in this guy somehow. It's in a way that he could never have predicted. In a way that just somehow he represents the converging of a certain time in art and a certain time in technology, and a lot of converging fandoms. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, well, he was, I mean, as everybody has said a million times, he happened to be, and maybe it's Mike's doing, who knows, but he happened to hit at a time when he was really cutting edge. And I don't think he has been able to understand or recapture, well, certainly not recapture, but to understand how cutting edge what he was doing was.
Well, it's probably that's a good point. It's probably rare when somebody stumbles upon a phenomenon that they even know what it is they've stumbled upon. It's
Right.
like it's because it's not so much they're doing as it is like they struck oil. And they're like, and everybody's like, why was there oil there? And he's like, I don't fucking know.
Right.
I struck oil. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think he even understands it. I think he thinks, well, I'm Steven Spielberg. That's I struck oil because Steven
Yeah.
Spielberg struck oil, and that's how I struck oil. I drilled in the place that a director would drill, and I don't think he understands that the consumption has completely changed, and he changed it. He really changed it.
Yeah,
And
it's like he pioneered something he doesn't fully understand, which is because you expect like, oh well, if you changed the game, then you created the game, right? And he's like, no,
right,
I would have just as soon, if not preferred, to have been a commercial filmmaker. But I look at it and I'm like, I think what you did is way cooler than being a commercial filmmaker.
yeah, I don't disagree. I not that long ago I was thinking, well, I'll put out like a no budget horror movie every year, and that'll be the thing that I do on YouTube. And very quickly, talking about other people's movies, talking about whatever else was going on, like whatever was personal to me, turned into the thing that got 200 views instead of 20 views. And
Well, isn't that it? Is it when somebody watches a piece of art, they're looking for something personal. They're looking for expression. The reason you create art and the reason you make a fucking SNIX flick is because you want to express something. You
you're
want to do
right.
something personal, even if you don't yet know what that personal thing is. You're like, I don't know. I'm 18 and I've got a crustache, but I want to express something, and so I'm going to go in the backyard and do it. And that's actually one of the things I dig about the fourth one, or at least I think is of note, is that this is the one where, and again, we're going to be in 1998 for the rest of the time.
The Possessed Mask of SNIX. Let's
That's what it's
pay
called.
it the proper respect.
The fourth one. He announces, he's like, I desperately wanted to just make one by myself where no other human being was necessary. Again, I think I said this earlier, but you can tell how empowered he is by like, oh, what a relief.
Yeah.
I won't have to rely on anybody else. Now, I don't know if that means that the people around him were extremely unreliable. I know that making movies when I was growing up, that was the most challenging thing, was to find collaborators who, because everybody thinks it's fun for the first 10 minutes and nobody thinks it's fun after 10 months. And
Right. No,
so,
no ginger rat tail thinks it's fun
right,
after a full day.
right. So there's
I
like this
gotta go.
big,
I'm taking my Michael Jordan starter jacket and I'm going home.
exactly. Yeah. Like I have to go live a very standard 90s life now.
I gotta go watch Night Court and then
Have my supper.
whatever. Who's the boss? Whatever it is.
Exactly. There's a time for love and a time for.
That slow mo of him going for home plate. He doesn't make it. He doesn't make it, folks.
Exactly. But this one had a little bit of stop motion in it,
Yes.
and
That was, again,
yep,
each of the last four has a special effect.
right. Oh, I wanted to say something about that. When he said that, I was like, ah, yeah. If it is indeed just special effects, and he's like, I can't fit four special effects into one movie, then I agree with you. It's absurd. But I can understand the idea of like, all right, I've got like four distinct concepts, and to contrive a reason for all of them existing in a
Right.
movie,
The
may be
lore.
difficult.
The
Yeah,
deep
right.
lore of SNIX.
Yeah, right. Like what integrity are you breaking by cramming all these things together? It's absurd, but it's sort of like I want. There's something sound underneath that, and I was actually like, it's funny because James, that's something he can be accused of. It's very Roger Corman, it's very Lloyd Kaufman, but like, there's some gimmick first, and
Yep.
then a story follows.
Yep.
So it's like, oh, it's a disembodied head. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but like I'll come up with a story to do something with it. And of course, filmmakers like Robert Rodriguez, Rebel Without a Crew, that's the advice is like find something you have access to wrap the story around that, because then you'll have your production value locked in, and then you'll have something, you know, that you can give the audience. But it's probably not really the way to make movies ever. It's, you know, you never want to contrive a story around. Again, I recognize how absurd this sounds talking about the SNIX Flicks. So, so zoom out with me. But you never want to contrive a story around a gimmick. You want your set pieces to organically follow and service.
Set, my house,
woods,
gimmick,
laundry room,
construction paper on a fishing line.
Yeah. Oh, probably, you know, in the at the end of the third one, just to backtrack just for a second, that's when he flushes it down the toilet.
Yes.
And that has overtones of AVGN too, where there's kind of they're now officially laughing at their own movie, you know?
Yes. No, and I should point that out too, is there is I think throughout, but probably with the third moving forward, because again, I think the second is, to quote AVGN, dog shit. I think the third is the one that really starts embracing the comedy of the absurdity of everything that's going on.
Yeah.
Again, not to sound too serious about it, but I think that's where they really start saying, like, oh, this is a comedy. Like, we're having fun. Like, we're getting a bunch of friends together to have a good time, and that good time is going to translate into the movie.
Because the point remains that he just wants to make a movie, and what he makes isn't all that important. And so that's probably why he sequelizes past films. He's like, well, it's a starting place. It's something I can, you know, it's at least in his own mind, like, you know, it's a decent enough foundation.
The neighborhood kids, like, they like SNIX. Hey,
everybody likes SNIX.
Everybody loves SNIX.
I only have one note for the fifth one, just one. I have nothing else to say about it. And that note is 2 words, or is it 1 word? I don't know. Lawnmower. There's nothing that goes on in this movie but a lawnmower.
I'll say this. I'm not wearing you. You were in a toilet.
That's good.
That is also, and then that's 1 bullet point, and then my other bullet point is lawnmower chase scene.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's all that movie has going on.
I bet you, though, that for an 18-year-old making his movie, that lawnmower meant production value.
Right.
Yeah.
I was confused why SNIX, when I can't think of the kid's name, but when the kid's name abandons the lawnmower, I was confused why SNIX didn't jump on the lawnmower, because clearly that was the faster mode of transportation.
Well, yeah, and he takes it out on the road, and so it's pretty funny. You know, you can, again, if you go from raw footage as a child to lawnmower out on the road, you can see why James started to get more and more of a thrill out of making these movies, for sure.
Right. Well, he had, and I made kids movies when I was a kid. My friend Garth and we were big fans of Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, or Return of the Killer Tomatoes was I think the movie that we really glommed onto. And we started making Attack of the Killer blank movies for our entire childhoods.
It's a good template.
And, it was super fun. It was whatever was available in large quantities was what was going to attack that day. That's how we spent our summers. And if we had access to a rider lawnmower, guess what? That the movie we made that day was going to be Attack of the Killer overgrown grass blades or something. Like, it was going to involve, that was going to be the thing that we based the whole movie around. And and again, this is maybe the lawnmower is maybe the height of where I start to not understand if my love of these movies comes from because I made movies when I was a kid,
Oh yeah. Well,
or
that's your
because
point of reference for sure.
right, or because I love so bad they're good movies. And I'm somewhere in between, and I don't know where that line is.
Two great tastes that taste great together. Yeah. No, I think it's like, I mean, one of the things that has been enlightening about having a 4-year-old, who I'm introducing a lot of pop culture to, is you start, you know that a lot of the ways that you enjoy comedies and movies is because you already have a foundational understanding of the culture around you. And so you have a lot of reference points. And so when you watch something, you're like, oh, this means that everything's in code, everything's a signal.
Yeah,
And you already learned that language. And so that's how you're able to enjoy things. And a 4-year-old doesn't have the points of reference. She is new to the English language and she's new to the culture that she's in. So
right.
we watch an episode of Simpsons and she's like, why is
What?
it funny that he, there you go again, Marge. Always taking somebody else's side. Flanders, the water department, God. Okay. Well, why is that? Why is that funny? Because the water department and God are not the same things. You know.
That's a quick jump.
Yeah. 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 So it's sometimes I think like when I make something.
Please show her who's the boss.
Yeah, you think she'll get it?
And see if she goes, well, it's funny because he's not the boss.
The premise is no. There's definitely times where I've made stuff that I'm like, this would be fucking incomprehensible if you didn't have some awareness of the culture around you.
Right.
Or hell, I'll show my dad an episode of Boxmack or something, and he's just like, I don't know what the hell anybody's talking about in this thing. It's like to him, it's an alien language.
Right.
So yes, you have to have a shared culture to understand some of this stuff in the first place. So there's certainly enough. I think it's totally valid to be like, I like something because it's connected to this. That's what art is really in a lot of ways.
That's true. So, do you think? I mean, we're not to the end yet, but do you think that somebody? So, I here's a hot take. I hate The Room. I hate Tommy Wiseau. I don't think that movie is fun in any way. Troll 2, I rented when I was a kid, blind. I saw the first Troll. And I loved it, and I wandered down the horror aisle and saw Troll 2, and I thought, oh my god, there's a Troll 2. Yes, it had no connection to the original Troll. It didn't connect in like a film production, in a film standard way. It was garbage. It was like horny guy chewing corn on the cob and like corn on the cob bursting all over him. I hated it as a kid. Do you think somebody who doesn't know film production, that doesn't know James Rolfe, that doesn't know the history, that doesn't know Rocky Horror Picture Show, do you think somebody that doesn't know Midnight Movies could like sit down with a bunch of people that are like here to have a good time? Do you think they could sit down and like get into it, have fun? Like if there was a shorthand, if there was a language, if there was when this character says I will destroy you, you have to shout this at the screen. If you do this, if a character says this, you have to take a shot. If you have to do this, if you gamified it, if you sportified it.
I think the ideal would be that you do all those same things with people that at the very least have an affection for that era and those kinds of activities. They get it and they feel positively about children making movies, children expressing themselves.
Right.
It's got to connect personally, I think, on some level. But yeah, because I've been to one time in Boston, I went to a public screening of The Room that Tommy and what's his face were at, Greg. And yeah, there's a lot of people in the audience who are not filmmakers. You know,
Right.
they're not like, oh, it's funny because on a film set you wouldn't normally do that, or what. You know, they don't have the background knowledge, so they're laughing at, I guess, the absolute baffling, absurd decisions that creative decisions this person is making that nobody else on the planet would ever make. It's just too stupid.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so I don't know that that's present here. Like where the common person would be like, oh, I'm charmed by the fact that, or it elicits laughter out of me that's bad the way it is. I think it would require you'd have to start from a place of affection for like a little bit of nostalgia, even of like I remember those days. They were a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, and I wrote down too that especially in the first movie there were, because everything was in camera, there are cuts where there's static. And in that static, you hear what was previously recorded on that VHS tape.
Oh yeah, turtles.
And
stuff.
it's
Yeah,
turtles. And
Yeah.
it couldn't be a more appropriate thing to have been recorded previously on that tape. So, in between a shot of James Rolfe's 13-year-old eyes,
Yeah, that's a cute moment.
you hear like, "Hey, Shredhead! We gotta get the Shredhead!" Whatever it is. I can't remember what it
Yeah.
is, but there's so many. I do think watching it that, and I came to this place over an evolution, because like I said, I think I talked to you the first time I sat down. I think somebody on the Cinemassacre Truth subreddit posted a clip from one of these videos, and I sought it out and watched the video, and I was like, these are fun. These are really fun to watch. And I said something to you where I was like, we've kind of like sort of talked about, because we're two people that got like a weird traction from the Cinemassacre fans as haters, even though we're not haters. We've sort of gotten this weird reputation as people that hate Cinemassacre. That it would be fun to do something, and there were the options of do something negative or do something positive. And positive was, I really like these SNIX. Like, I really like taking a... What does he say? Going back to the past to... I can't think of the song lyric to the Angry Video Game Nerd
Take you
song.
back to the past.
Yeah. But when I saw that clip, I went back and I sought out these SNIX flicks, which I had never watched, and really sat down and spent that hour and 47 minutes going through them. And I was like, this is fun. And after like the fourth time, I was like, this is some kind of art where I don't know if anything else James Rolfe has ever produced, because I did watch, when I found this video archive of these films that he had listed on his IMDb, I started going through them, and everything after he went to college was unwatchable. It was really zero fun, zero irony, like unwatchable. And SNIX is a lot of fun. And I think a lot of people would really enjoy watching this like pure dream. And that's what it is. It's like a dream of a kid.
And it is a success story. Is the other piece
It is.
to that.
It really
He
is.
does go on to be a very successful person.
Yes.
I would say one thing that I wish for James, that I think would have rounded him out, that maybe would have helped prevent some of the problems that developed later, is this thing of like, well, collaborating is an unfortunate consequence of filmmaking. It seems like that's kind of where he landed, where he was like, ugh, the part that involves other people sucks,
Right.
And yet certainly the collaboration with Mike was instrumental in his success. It allowed him to be a creative professionally. And I've heard things like he really kind of needed to rely on Kevin Finn, the co-director of the AVGN movie, to sort of be the more sociable person. And now he kind of finds it's like I either have to do it all by myself or somebody else has to do all of it. Like I can't like collaborate with somebody. One of the things I feel really fortunate about I won the lottery in some ways, was that I had this older friend who took an interest in my creative passions, through John.
Yeah.
I was 13, 14, he was 20. He could drive, he could help, he knew a little bit about technology, he could write a little bit of music. All of a sudden the dream of a 14-year-old was kind of legitimized,
right.
was enabled certainly by an older person that not only could contribute but also believed in me. And then add to that, like my girlfriend who would become my wife, she becomes a producer on that stuff early on and would continue to so they were the introduction of them in my life was like a deadly combination of like, oh well, now we're really gonna be able to create stuff, and I'll be able to, because honest for me, like the joy of filmmaking is being able to share in it with other people.
Yeah.
If you're doing it in a if you're doing it in a vacuum, there's some joy in that. There's some DIY cred, and he obviously enjoys that, and I get it. But I remember talking to John when I was a kid, and we were struggling our way through our first feature, and he was like, "Well, it's really hard. Sometimes I imagine that I really would enjoy having finished it, but I don't really enjoy the journey." And I understood what he meant, of course. It's like, yeah, the hard work sucks, and reaping the rewards is awesome. So, ain't that a bitch? But if you stick with it long enough, and I'm not saying James hasn't. I'm just speaking more abstractly. If you stick with it long enough and you actually love filmmaking, at some point the journey is its own reward.
Yeah.
Being in the middle of it, being around people who love you, being around people you love, expressing and creating with other people. That's why, like, later on I was able to direct something I didn't write, and I produced a couple of short films, and it really starts to be like, no, I'm just glad to be alive making movies.
Yeah.
And again, I emphasize the fact that, like, look, I'm not mad at this person.
Right.
I'm a fan who wants to talk about him. But if I were to mourn anything, if I were to go, oh, that's too bad, oh, that actually kind of sucks, it would be that it would seem as though the part of him that's like, I'm going to die if I don't make this SNIX movie, that seems to be gone. That seems to be like, yeah, somebody else can make a James Rolfe movie, but James Rolfe's not going to make it. That's like, oh, that's actually I think the art community loses something when that happens.
I agree. I think there is in that 2013 introduction to the SNIX Flicks, he even says something like, maybe someone will do, like, these movies are bad, and maybe someone will do a Mystery Science Theater commentary over these movies. And I think that's him really recognizing his place. I don't know. I think that's where he
and doesn't he say something like, and maybe it will inspire somebody else to go out and make something
like that. Yeah, like seeing, because he says something like he over and over again states that these movies are bad. And even 1998 James states that, these movies are bad.
He's not under any dissolution.
Right. Because everybody, like, the truthers love to, like, talk about his ego in those 1998 clips. But
and it's true. It's on its face. It's there's an ego there, and it's cringy and blah blah blah. But I do implore them to just consider for a moment that, like, that kind of dysfunctional ego thing is a little bit necessary to jumpstart a creative career.
Yes,
it is,
and it's a kid, and it's like there's so, like, I watched these movies last night. I watched these movies, and I thought, I made movies when I was a kid, and God, I wish I had had the ego to sit down and film behind the scenes retrospectives of things that I made in 1993, in 1998. Like, it's to all, like, as silly as it is, it's to all of our benefit as far as fans and viewers. And I mean, I guess at
I
this,
think it's super admirable, and that's almost a great place to leave it. Is like, if you find yourself going, oh, I wish I had been as clueless and unafraid of failure,
yeah,
unafraid of looking silly as this guy was, as uninhibited as this guy was, maybe I would have went on to make more stuff.
yeah,
That to me is the is what makes it special that he made it, provided it in the first place, and I think was the secret to his success. I just hope that he can recapture some of the actual love of doing it, because if you love to do it, you're going to find time to do it. That's the thing.
amen. And the real end must be the great quote from any SNIX Flicks, which is when Zins says, "You must get the box of horrors. It's in the bathroom." That's it. That's my favorite quote from any SNIX Flicks.
Love it. Well, go check them out. They're on, if you YouTube search Six SNIX Flicks, you'll find a playlist. Somebody else, I think, is providing them at this point.
Yes.
And they have all their intros intact, and so you can go on this journey with us. And if you're watching this podcast on my channel, Brian, where can people find you?
My YouTube channel is Hat Hole Home Video. It's a place where I celebrate, really, again, my childhood growing up next to a video store. It's really where I celebrate the VHS video stores of growing up in the 80s and 90s. Hat Hole Home Video.
Go check it out. And if you're over on Brian's channel and you want to check out Red Cow Entertainment, we have two channels. Red Cow Arcade, which is podcasts like these. Sometimes we talk about AVGN. We also talk about everything else in the whole wide world, mostly pop culture and retro gaming. And then over on our main channel, Red Cow Entertainment, we have a number of web series dedicated to. We have a show called Box Mac, where we review every macaroni and cheese. You can go back and check out our features, short films.
How many mac and cheese are left at this point?
There's plenty.
Really?
Honestly, we had to tell our fans to stop sending them because we were like, okay, they're just going to expire.
There's a storage unit that's just solid mac and cheese.
We call it the Hall of Macs, yeah. But there's no stopping Box Mac, that's for sure. If anything, we've had to slow it down some. But we do a lot of other. Our shows, generally speaking, star our friend Junt, big dude with a big personality, who's a bargain shopper. He's a foodie. He's a techie. He's a riot. We love him. That's why we put him on. That's why we put him on YouTube. So you can, also on that same channel, you can check out EJ, who's my normal podcast co-host. He does barbecuing and grilling and tech reviews as well. He's hilarious. His videos are super high quality.
Yep.
And go check us out.
Very right. And to the 100 people that are going to see this on my channel, I'm a big individually. I think everybody on Red Cow is incredibly funny. So definitely check them out.
Isn't Nina funny?
Nina's okay. We'll end. This is where we'll end. Is because my wife and I watch everything Red Cow. We found, over the last year, we've like everybody with the James Rolfe non-traversy, we've discovered Red Cow, and we love Box Mac, we love Junt's Cart, we love anything you guys do, but in every video, either John or Nina will say something that is incredibly idiosyncratic as far as retail shopping. Yeah. And my wife will go, like, she'll have that Medea moment in everything where it's like, they will say the thing that's you would think only a single human being would have that opinion. And my wife will
Turns
go,
out.
that is the correct opinion to have about that particular value.
I love them. I love them both. They have a certain appeal that I don't have. I've got a little bit of a sharper edge. They're the every person in some ways, and no, they look like I said before, man. They made my whole film life happen. They loved me enough to go along for a lot of stupid rides with me,
Oh, yeah.
and I'm just so grateful to have them. So hey, and I'm grateful for you for doing this. This was a super cool chat. I hope you enjoyed
Absolutely.
it.
I am always available.
Awesome,
Always
awesome. We'll
available.
have to do it again.
Absolutely.
Very good. All right, Brian. Be
Frankie,
well. Thank you.
thank you.